The NEA must stop serving the establishment. The NEA must become an activist for real change. The NEA must put principles over politics. Hello, I'm Mark Norberg. I'm an 8th grade English teacher, and I'm running for NEA president. I'm running because we must transform our union from passively working within the political establishment into a dynamic, activist force for real education reform and social change. And we must acknowledge that uncritically working within the establishment, the DC status quo, is a dereliction of our responsibility to our members. To illustrate this point, we need only examine the NEA's involvement in the recent passage of the coronavirus bailout bill. On March 26th, our own NEA Today released an article entitled COVID-19 Stimulus Package Helps Students and Educators. According to our article, the Senate, by a 96-0 vote, passed the $2.2 trillion relief package that includes more than $30 billion in emergency education funding. The article continues by assuring us that, quote, it was clear that they, that's Congress, heard educators' warning that school closures forced by the epidemic could bring terrible consequences for students, families, and local economies. We are told of the $1,200 checks to households, an education stabilization fund, and student loans being deferred for 6 months. The article trumpets the NEA's involvement in these actions by pointing out that the, quote, NEA's government relations team worked night and day to ensure the needs of students and educators were addressed in this bill. Now, certainly, that all sounds fantastic. $30 billion is indeed a lot of money. And while the article does stop to briefly mention that, the bill is not perfect, the overall message is unmistakably of a job well done, of a wonderful first step, and affirms that it, quote, does address many urgent needs of our students, educators, and schools. If this was the complete truth of the matter, I'd be the first one to say, thank you, NEA and NEA government relations team. But unfortunately, that's not the complete truth. In fact, it's just a tiny sliver of the whole truth. In fact, the COVID-19 stimulus package is the single largest transfer of wealth to the corporate sector in the history of this country. The intent of this bill is not to protect schools, students, families, or their communities, nor are the alleged education provisions anything more than token gestures. Because although $30 billion sure sounds like a heck of a lot of money, it's only 1.3% of the total size of the bill. The remaining 98.7%, that's $2.17 trillion, all goes to corporate America with almost no strings attached and nothing but a 5-member oversight committee to somehow ensure that the money is spent appropriately. Even mainstream establishment news outlets have been shocked. The Atlantic called it a moral failure. Poverty advocate Reverend William Barber in Time magazine cited the evil tucked into the $2 trillion corona stimulus bill. The Washington Post is reporting that the bill overwhelmingly benefits millionaires. And noted journalist Jonathan Chait, writing for the New York Magazine, called it a corrupt stimulus slush fund. The shocking lack of oversight led Special Inspector of the 2008 bailout, that's Neil Borogsky, to tell Matt Taibbi of Rolling Stone that, quote, I'd be looking for tens of billions of loss due to fraud. So what is it that these major news organizations saw in this bill that our own team, working night and day, somehow missed? Even on its own terms, The NEA today's contention that the COVID-19 relief bill addresses even some of America's education needs is wildly off the mark. According to Ed Week, quote, the K-12 relief package amounts to less than 2% of all spending on public schools. Now, that's bad enough. But when we put this alleged relief funding into real-world context, its true worthlessness really becomes clear. Due to the economic downturn that is now a certainty, states are going to see tax revenues fall precipitously, which means budget cuts are coming. And again, according to Ed Week, if states slice just 8% from education funding, even with the coronavirus relief bill, all states will see a decrease in per student spending. And check this out. In the long term, this bill is estimated to cost individual taxpayers $18,000 each, while giving us a mere $1,200 in return. It is a fantastic swindle of the American public, and the NEA has gone along with it. Our national union, lending its support to the trillions being spent to bail out our largest corporations, is bad enough. But it is our accommodating of the whole concept of prioritizing corporate America in times of crisis that is the real sin. By bestowing its stamp of approval, the NEA is providing cover to perpetuate, as Matt Taibbi describes, a Ponzi-like pattern for corporate America. Borrow, inflate, strip assets, crash, get bailed out, and start over. With us, our school districts, our communities, having to pay the price for it. When our local unions enter into their annual budget fights, these corporate bailouts are one major reason why money is so scarce. The American taxpayer is strapped from this ongoing cycle of bailing out the corporate elites. And by uncritically supporting this process, we, as the NEA union members, become willing accomplices to the very forces working against us. But even if the article had presented the full, truthful picture of how awful the bailout bill really is for educators and their communities, the NEA still would have failed. It would have failed because simply reporting out news in a crisis should not be the extent of our efforts. A massive opportunity to sound a nationwide alarm about the bailout, to join with allies, organize protests, and use our 3.2 million members to create political pressure to stop, or at the very least make real improvements to the bill, was squandered. But alas, this is our status quo. And that's why I'm running for NEA president. I'm running to change the way our national union operates, to change our approach from tiptoeing around Washington with cap in hand and then claiming victory when thrown table scraps, to an approach that recognizes we are the world's largest labor union. And as such, we not only have the ability to apply real pressure to Congress and leverage that pressure to force action on our agenda, but the duty as well. Politics is about power. It's not about asking nicely for things. It's about using all of the tools in your arsenal to achieve your goals, something we are nowhere near to doing. If you know your history and those times when unions have been successful, you know that the job of a union is to agitate. Our political system has been failing us for decades. We must stop working politely within the establishment, hoping for a, quote, seat at the table. The job of a union is to apply pressure to the system from outside the system. And we do that not by periodic newsletters, but by mass direct action, taking to the streets with coordinated protests around clear and focused goals. The NEA, as the world's largest labor union, is uniquely suited to lead this effort. We have the people and we have the infrastructure. I'm running for NEA president to activate that power. How we do that is limited only by our imagination. But imagine using our national union to engage our members coast to coast in the drafting of a federal education bill of rights. 10 education priorities that we want the federal government to start paying for with its $21 trillion economy. Imagine using our national union to organize a million educator march on Washington, D.C., coordinated with thousands of simultaneous marches at every single school district in the country to promote those demands. Imagine our national union expanding that coalition by reaching out to the AFL-CIO and other labor unions to join our day of action. Now imagine tens of millions marching, not just for education rights, but economic and labor rights as well. This is just the beginning of what the world's largest labor union could be doing with its power and size. This is just one example of how we can lead the nation in turning the tables on the Washington establishment, and instead of taking what we can get, forcing them to bend to our will, and bringing in an age where our tax dollars are spent on us, on the majority, on our students, on our schools, and our most needy. But first, we have to have a leadership team that is not afraid to use that power. We must have a leadership team that understands that standing up to the political status quo, and especially to those we consider allies, is essential to that fight. There is no doubt in my mind that we can have everything we want if we are willing to stand together and fight for it. I'm Mark Norberg. I'm running for NEA president, and I thank you so very much for your time. For more info on this and other ideas on transforming our national union into a powerhouse for education reform and real social change, go to norbergforneaprez.com. Thank you.